Hi, I'm Liz, and I've been living with cancer now for 10 years. I have a cancer called multiple myeloma, which is a blood cancer, and I was first diagnosed with this in 2002, but it was the precursor to the actual disease. It's something called MGUS. And so I was very lucky. I was monitored for 10 years on an annual basis, which meant that when it did progress to the full disease, they actually caught it really early so that they could start treatment really early. So I've had 2 stem cell transplants, and since the last stem cell transplant, I've been on constant treatment, so I'm now on maintenance treatment. And I consider myself blessed that they have managed to treat me and look after me so well for the last 10 years.
Well, I'm Roger Bowman, and I've had cancer for 7 years. I had quite a big operation to remove a kidney and a tumour that was going up the vein to my heart. And after that, I've been having treatment in that oncology for a tumour on my other kidney and a little tumour on my lung. And I've been having this treatment for about 7 years now, and I can't speak highly enough of all the treatment I've had.
So when you were first diagnosed, Roger, what was the effect on your life? What was the response from people you knew?
Well, I'd never ever been near a doctor all my life, and to come off a farm and have this diagnosed, it was something completely different. And I had a lot of help, but it was the waiting of the diagnosis, which took about 6 weeks, and everything seemed to be getting, you have a level where you think you're going to be, then everything was getting worse and worse. Then there was one morning I went down to the urologist at the Freeman Hospital. It was 8:30 in the morning, and I thought that was it. I thought there wouldn't be anything they could do for us. And he said, I'm going to see that other consultant. And he came back out, he says, we're going to do an operation in 3 weeks' time. And that's when my story changed. And I've got a little anecdote to that. I had a jumper on that my granddaughter had bought us for my birthday. And it was the first time I've had it on. And I'm not superstitious, but that changed my look. And every meeting I've had with a consultant for 7 years, I've wore that jumper.
Excellent.
So that's how I came. So how did it affect you, Liz?
Well, yeah, interesting, because my story's slightly different, because I knew for quite a long while that there was the possibility that it would eventually progress to full-blown myeloma. I was in a way prepared for it. It didn't come as a huge shock. And I'd also had cancer before. I had thyroid cancer when I was in my 30s. So unlike you'd obviously experienced really good health for the whole of your life. I had actually already had cancer once. I mean, I'll be honest and say, I had spent most of my life thinking, oh, well, lightning doesn't strike twice. And unfortunately, it does.
It does, it does.
Yes, you can't guarantee anything. So, but in a way, I was very lucky, like I say, because it was diagnosed really early. Because myeloma is a strange cancer, because the symptoms are really difficult to pin down. They can be anything. I mean, under normal circumstances, you just get really, really bad fatigue. You're tired all the time. You get backaches, that sort of thing. And it can be diagnosed very easily as something else. So I was incredibly lucky that they knew what it was, and therefore they could actually start treatment quickly. But it was difficult, and what I found difficult about it more than anything was that nobody knew anything about the type of cancer I had. So I was obviously at work full time when I was diagnosed, And I will be honest and say that I had a really, really bad time at work because nobody actually believed that I was ill, because they didn't understand the type of cancer I had. So it was really, really difficult for me at work. I eventually took early retirement, and when I started treatment a month after I'd taken retirement. And like you, I cannot express how grateful I am for the amount of care and support and friendship and like all the good things I have had from, you know, the nurses and the doctors, the consultants and everybody. So once I started treatment, it was great. The first stem cell transplant, I couldn't believe how great I felt after it. And I got 4 years remission, which was brilliant. Yeah. So what I found most difficult was, I suppose, the lack of knowledge about the type of cancer that I had, and sort of people's inability to sort of understand the symptoms and where it went. And also, you know, family and friends were wonderful, really, really good. But the work situation was really difficult.
See, I was completely different.
Yeah.
After the operation, I did my exercises because I live a mile away from the farm, because my family lived in the farm. So I used to walk around the village, and it used to be, I couldn't, it was more of a chore doing exercises. Then I got back to the farm, then I was doing my exercises without us knowing.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like going back to work. I was just pretending I was working, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And, but like all the farming community, and it's like a close-knit community in the country. Everybody was on my side.
Wonderful.
They couldn't do plenty for us. I mean, there was people seeing how well I looked, where I knew they were just trying to see I looked well, and I knew I wasn't. But like a year into the treatment, I started gaining weight again and getting...
Brilliant.
So I classified myself as one of the lucky ones.
Yeah.
But I didn't have time to give up because I had so much to do.
Yeah.
And animals on the farm as well. There was 5 geese on the farm, and there was one of them born in a different hatching, and it was sort of like a loner, and I had a chair up in one of the sheds, and I used to sit in the sun, and this goose arrived and used to sit next to us by the chair, and if anybody came, it would be standing right next to us. And if I was on the telephone, the mobile phone, anybody, it was standing next to us and talking away. And the vet came one day to have a look at an animal. And she says, "Roger, what's going on with this goose in you?" And I says, "I haven't got a clue." But somebody else came and they said it's lucky. So I just left it at that. But the animals know as well, like, you know, that you're not well, like, you know.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, my dog does. Yeah, if I'm not feeling well, my dog always curls up beside me. Yeah.
So you didn't have a lot of sympathy at work, Liz?
Not at work, no. I mean, like, as I say, friends and family, and once I'd retired and once I'd started treatment, everything was absolutely fine, you know. And like I say, I can't express how great the people at the hospital, you know, at the hospital in the oncology day unit were, the nurses and everybody, people were absolutely wonderful. But what I would say is that if people are having difficulties at work, they should really ask for help, is what I would say. I would really recommend it. If you're having problems at work because of your cancer, or you've got any questions at all, I would really urge people to ask for advice or get help from somebody so that you're not completely alone and you feel as though you're getting some support. Yeah. I mean, a lot does depend on your employer. I mean, obviously your situation was completely different because being a farmer, you're completely independent and, you know, you have to work, and it's very sort of self, you know, dependent. But, you know, as an employee of a company, I think a lot depends on your, you know, your relationship with your employer and how much sympathy you get from them. So I would really just urge anybody who's at work.
I was different
Of
again,
course.
like, you know, and really the farm repaired me.
Yeah, of course.
Because it got me away from thinking and whatnot, and it got us back to having a normal life.
Yeah.
Although I couldn't do anything, I just pretended I was farming it.
Yeah.
But just getting back to the treatment gynecology unit, the first time I saw my consultant, he says, "Oh, the girls at Hexham will look after you." And that is the best thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah.
I came into here, they made me feel really at home.
Yeah.
And, you know, coming in here the first time, I've seen people come in and they're really frightened.
Of course.
And they settled me down. It was tremendous, like, you know.
Yeah, I agree.
And I can't speak highly enough of the nurses in here.
I agree.
It's more than nursing what they do in here.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I've seen it, like, firsthand, people coming in terrified, and they settle them down, and after about half an hour, they're all right. And I don't know what you found. You come in here and you sit down and you talk to people, and I've met some lovely, lovely people in here.
Me too.
But you get some people that'll talk and some will not talk, and that's sort of hiding what's wrong with them.
Of course. I think different people have different reactions to it, don't they? And how they sort of, how they deal with it or cope with it is completely different. And like you, I've had similar experiences where, I mean, I remember the first time, because I was actually being treated at another hospital when I was first diagnosed, and then I asked to be transferred after my first stem cell transplant, because the treatment then became where I had to come in sort of 2 or 3 times a week, and it just wasn't viable to do the travelling. And honestly, I couldn't, like you, even though I hadn't just been diagnosed, it was still quite a sort of a scary experience coming to a new hospital and meeting new staff and sort of fitting into a different regime, how they, you know, how they did things, the way they organised things was different. But I cannot fault them for the kindness and the sort of support that they gave me when I first came here. They were absolutely lovely. And you're just made to feel as though you're visiting friends and family when you come. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like wonderful the way they sort of treat people, I've got to say. Absolutely fantastic. And like you, I've met some really nice people when I've come in, but I think different people sort of react in different ways, and some people want to be quiet and are worried about talking about it, and other people, a bit like you and me,
Well,
are happy to chat.
I was sitting here one day and the phone rang.
Yeah.
And there was an old bloke sitting on the other side of the room, and it was somebody rang up about the farm, and this old person sitting opposite says, "You're a farmer?" And I says, "I am," and he says, "Well, I farm up Hexhamshire and whatnot," and he was about 20 years older than me. And it was like going back 50 years, and I just listened to him for half an hour.
Wow.
And it's, you know, you wouldn't expect that in an oncology ward.
No, absolutely.
And that's, you know, you're right about, I've met some amazing people in here,
Yeah.
like, you know. Liz, when you found out you had cancer, how did it change your life, and how did you cope with it? And what was other people like, you know, when you mentioned cancer?
Yeah, difficult. I'll be honest with you, initially it was quite difficult. And I think there's that thing that all of a sudden, the things that you'd hoped that you could do and the things you wanted to do were completely changed.
Yes.
And you found that you couldn't do that. I mean, I had huge plans for my retirement and what I was going to do, but none of that was possible any longer because of the cancer. And it is quite it's quite a difficult thing to take on board. I think the thing that I noticed most was the fact that it was impossible to make plans. All of a sudden, you couldn't turn around and go, oh, well, I'm going to do this next year, you know, or even something as simple as going on holiday. Oh, I can't book this holiday next year because actually I don't know how I'm going to feel. So it was difficult. And I think you have to sort of adjust the way you think around that, which takes a while. People's reactions were interesting. Some people, I think, find it very difficult. If they haven't experienced sort of some sort of chronic illness themselves or within their family, I think they find it quite difficult to sort of know how to approach you or how to talk to you. But as a general rule, I found that my family and friends, close friends, were absolutely fine about it, even though they found it tough. And I think, and I'm sure you found exactly the same thing, it's that, the uncertainty, right? I think people tend to think with cancer, you either are cured or you die. And they don't really, unless they've experienced it themselves or they have somebody in their family who's experienced it, I think people find it difficult to understand that you can live with cancer for as long as, for instance, we have. Like 7-10 years is not unusual nowadays. And that's because of the amazing research they've done and the sort of leaps and bounds that they've made in treatment and things, which is fantastic. But I think people find that quite difficult as well, you know. And I think you mentioned before, it's about being normal and allowing people to treat you like you're normal. The cancer shouldn't take you over. It's just a part of you and you have to live with it. And I think that's one of the things. It's about allowing people to treat you as though you're just anybody. It's not the cancer that defines you, is it?
Well, I get scanned every 3 months.
Right.
So you live in 3 month blocks.
Yes.
And, you know, you have a normal life.
Yeah.
Then you get scanned and you're waiting for the scan. And I mean, in here, I get scanned at Hexham and I don't have to wait long for the results.
Yeah.
And whatnot. But just getting back to how people react to you, that was a close friend of mine. He didn't say much when he found out I had cancer. And a bit later, he says, I'm sorry. But he says, I honestly didn't know what to say to you. And that's the other side. Then you get other people, when they found out I had cancer, they were starting to walk back a little bit, you know.
Yes.
And it's still got a stigma about it, cancer.
Yes, I agree.
And I know people's, like the treatments come on and on and on.
Yeah.
But it's still got that little bit stigma about it.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think it's, you know, different people's reactions are different. And like you, I had people who sort of backed away a bit when they first found out. And I think a lot of that is just, as you've said, it's fear. It's not knowing how to react to somebody or what sort of response you should have to them, which I think is a shame in this day and age. you know, I think it's.
But as more and more population gets cancer,
Absolutely, yeah.
so you don't know what's round the corner.
No, absolutely.
Well, my ex-wife came back to look after me, and she didn't need to do it.
That's lovely.
But she's been there every inch of the way, and she's still here for the scan results and everything like that. And I wouldn't have been alive now if it hadn't have been for her and the nurses in here, because they give you stability.
Yeah.
Now, she was unfortunate to have a bit breast cancer, but she caught it quick enough.
Brilliant.
And I just thought, if anybody deserved not to get it, it was her. But she's in remission now, so I'm totally pleased about that. But she sort of treated differently. And I wouldn't say she hid it, but she just went on normal, like, you know. But it was caught very early, so.
Excellent.
And, you know, people say go and get a mammogram and whatnot. Please do it, because it could save your life.
I agree with you. I couldn't agree more. If you've got any worries at all about anything, go and get tests. Whether it's a mammogram, whether it's prostate cancer, whatever it is, go and get tested if you've got. And as soon as possible is what I would say, because the earlier it's diagnosed, the more chance you have. And it's frightening, but basically it's worth it. Much, much better to get tested and know.
See, I was quite normal. Would finish lambing, and I normally lose quite a bit of weight over the lambing time.
Right.
And somebody says, you've lost more weight than normal, like, you know. So that's how my journey started. I went to sit. Well, I was lying down one night and I felt a lump.
Oh, right, okay.
In my side. And I had to go and see the doctor about something else.
Yeah.
And he says, just lie on that table and I'll have a quick look at you. Then all of a sudden, he says, I need you to go to Hexham.
Right.
Then I got referred, and I ended up with the Freeman. And it was, you know, to say, get there as quick as you can. They didn't waste very much time with me. But that's how that, and I would never ever thought, you know, it was 100 to 1 chance. I was just lying down one night and I felt this lump. Yeah. And later on, they said if I'd been any heavier, you know, plumper, I would never ever felt a lump. So I was lucky there. Yeah. So that's how my journey really started. Just the doctor. So you don't know.
No, it is so often down to luck, isn't it? That's the thing.
And I would never ever went about that because I'd never been.
No, you'd experienced good health all your life.
I'd already seen a doctor.
Yeah.
So it just you just don't know what's round the corner.
No, you really don't. And I think that's the thing as well. And I think there's that thing, isn't it? Like I said before, I'd actually already had cancer once. I'd had to have my thyroid removed because of thyroid cancer. And so I had already had cancer once, and there was a part of me that said, oh, well, I've had cancer now, I'm not going to get it again, right? But at least I was aware. Do you see what I mean? Because mine was detected, interestingly enough, I actually started to develop these sort of black marks around my eyes. Right. And I went to my GP because I thought it was melanoma. And he referred me to a dermatologist. And the dermatologist did loads and loads of tests, cleared me, did a biopsy, cleared me of melanoma, said it's definitely not that. But he actually found this raised paraprotein in my blood, which indicated that I had multiple myeloma. And honestly, I was absolutely staggered. He picked the phone up phoned the haematologist and referred me the same day. So basically I walked from dermatology to haematology to see the haematologist because of this. And so I was incredibly lucky, but like you, it was sort of luck that I'd gone to the doctor in the first place, and that the doctor had been sensible enough to refer me to a dermatologist so that things could be looked at immediately. Yeah. So I think there's an element of luck, but I, like you, would also really urge people, if they are worried about something, to go and get it looked at. You're far better off getting it looked at than you are just leaving it, I think.
But living in the country for me and going to the Freeman Hospital, it was like a different world.
Must have been.
Together.
Yeah.
And just referring back to the operation, I went in one Sunday afternoon for the operation on a Monday, and they had us ready to go down to for the operation, and I was going down there asking you your date of birth and whatnot, and I got down to where they knocked you out, and that says Roger Bowman and my date of birth and whatnot, and he says, it's all right, I know you, Roger. He says, I used to be your postman a few years ago.
Oh, really?
So, I mean, I still got up, counted up to 5, and that was it. But the postman knocked us out. Then when I came around 2 days later, this woman brought us around, and I says, Roger Bowman, this, that, and other. She says, all right, Roger, I know who you are. She says, I used to work in Barclays Bank years ago when you used to come in. So the postman knocked us out, and the woman from the bank brought us back around again. So I'd come out the country to the Freeman Hospital. So
Brilliant. Brilliant. That's absolutely fantastic.
Liz, what do you think the biggest taboo is with this cancer?
Right. I think definitely that the biggest taboo is talking about death. And I think in our society in the West, especially more recently, we've sort of been divorced from dying. It's like everybody feels as though they're going to live forever. And the reality of it is that there are two inescapable facts of life, death and taxes.
Yeah.
And basically, everybody is going to die at some point or another. And I think in a sort of a race for everybody to stay alive, we've forgotten that death is a natural process and part of life. And I think it makes it, I don't know, quite difficult for, I don't know whether you find this, for people like us who have cancer. I have no problems talking about death because I know that it's inevitable. And I also know that having had 10 years treatment, I'm probably quite close to it. And I would feel so much more comfortable if people felt relaxed about talking about that and were able to talk about that. But I do think people still find it very, very difficult. I don't know whether that's your experience as well.
Well, I think when you've got cancer, you think about death a little bit different.
Yeah.
Because it's probably just round the corner.
Yes.
And I mean, you sometimes think about, I thought about what I was going to do for my funeral and whatnot. And I had plenty of time to write down what I wanted.
Yeah.
A lot of people die and they don't know what they want.
Absolutely.
But there was one day my accountant said, I hope you've got a will made out, mine. And he says, I've been frightened to ask you. He says, I know you've got cancer, but I need your business in order.
Of course.
And I thought, what good advice, like, you know?
Yeah.
But he had to say that, like, you know, but like the taboo bit about it, it's sort of like the people hide the cancer and
Yeah.
whatnot. There was a woman once told me, she says, I've had my 70 years. She says, I'm quite happy. And I feel quite like that now. I've seen my grandchildren grow up.
Yeah.
They would have been 8 and 9 if I died when I had the cancer. So I've had the privilege
Yeah.
of seeing them grow up, and that means more than anything else. So
Absolutely.
with a desk job, I think with me, if I died tomorrow, I've had a lovely life.
Yeah.
I've done what I wanted to do. I've had a lovely occupation, and I've seen my grandchildren grow up.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, I agree with you. I think you're absolutely right. And that's exactly how I feel. And I think what you've just said about getting things in order, in a way, I feel quite privileged because, like you, I've had the opportunity to do things like write my will and make sure I know, you know, what I want, organise my funeral so I have exactly what I want at my funeral, and sort things out. And it's little things like, I'm not a great believer in leaving things to people after I'm dead, but like you, I've seen my son grow up, and I was privileged enough to go to his wedding last year. And he's married such a lovely girl, such a lovely woman. And I feel really grateful that I've been able to do that. But it's also given me the opportunity to do things like give them things that under normal circumstances you would have left to them when you were dead. And I'd rather have the fun of giving people things when I'm alive. You know, and I consider that a real privilege. So much like you, I suppose what I would say is death doesn't frighten me. You know, I think it's an inevitability. And I think talking about it is actually really healthy. I think it's better that we sort of acknowledge it and talk about it than we keep it quiet and don't discuss it. And I think there's a danger in our society that we sort of wrap it up in sort of platitudes and things. But as a farmer, you face death every day on the farm. That's the other thing.
And you get used with it with the animals,
yeah,
like, you
of
know.
course.
And animals are just as important as...
Yeah.
I mean, probably the worst time to hit me was when my collie dog died.
Yeah.
And he'd been with us through the cancer journey.
Of course.
But he was 15.
Yeah.
And he'd had a lovely life as
Yeah.
well. He'd never been tied up or nothing.
Yeah.
And he just lived on the farm, like, you know. And so he had a good life as well. But sort of given thing and whatnot. And I was quite lucky. I had a Macmillan community lad come to see me, and he had to help us with something, and he talked about death at the start, and we got that over with.
Good.
Then
yeah.
we talked about football and whatnot
Yeah.
after that. So we got that bit over.
Yeah.
Then we got back to normality, like, you know.
Yeah.
But if I went tomorrow, I'm quite happy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly the same as me, actually. Yeah, that's exactly the same as me.